Boim B'Shem Hashem, Shem Egen Shirteh, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rav Yaakov Zev Smith Shlita and Murah of Aim. To have the great Schuss sponsor and shir, call Egen Shirteh 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
Kibbut of Aim is always a challenging subject when a child is young, when he's born, certainly when he gets even a little older. The parents are serving him, and of course he doesn't have any idea about Kibbut of. And he gets older, hopefully he learns Torah, but does he have enough time to learn Hilchos Kibbut of? And Be'emes Rav Chazanish and Rav Segel both used to say, but before a Bein Ezmanim, a child should learn Hilchos Kibbut of Aim to know what to do. But who has time for that? And especially in the world we live in, it's the me generation, everything's about me. There's very little room in someone's heart for expecting others, Kibbut of Aim. You know, we used to say for a joke that in America the Sarah's Dibbet has been revised. It's Kabir as Bincha Ves Bitecha. But I just saw the Yaris Devash in Chelik Beis. He has in Jewish Beis and Yud Beis. It seemed in his time he had the same problem, that people think the mitzvah is to respect your children. So the only eight is to learn the sugya properly. And today we're going to focus on one part of Kibbut of. Kibbut of is a big sugya, but that is the mitzvah of Moira of Aim. As we'll see, not Kibbut of doing things, but what not to do. Now let me explain. As we know that the Kibbut of has a very prominent place in the Torah HaKadoshah. It's one of the Aseres HaDibros, both in Parshas Yisroi and later in V'yaschanon. And that alone, it's in the Aseres HaDibros, speaks volumes of how important Kibbut of Aim really is. What does it mean, Kibbut of Aim? So the Gemara in Kedusha Lamed Aleph and Beis explains, Eza Kibbut, Maichel, Mashke, you have to feed them, Malbish, dress them, Machdus, Umaitzi, bring them, take them. Kibbut is actually doing things that show kavod and love. Okay. But there's a third place that the Torah speaks about Kibbut of, and that's in Parshas Kedoshim. Ish imay v'aviv tira'u. A different word, not Kibbut, this is Moira, Yira. And what does that mean? So the same Gemara, Eza Moira, like Aymed b'mekaymai, a child should not stand in his father's place. Like Yoshev b'mekaymai, not to sit in his father's place. Like Saisid dvarav, don't contradict. V'lay machriyai, which we'll soon see what that means. But it's basically all lies. In other words, Kibbut is all do's. Moira seems to be the don'ts. So how would we classify the mitzvah of Kibbut of Moira of Aim? As a lice assay, right? Kibbut is an assay, and Moira is a lice assay. But if you look in the Moini HaMitzvahs, the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvahs, Reish Yud and Reish Yud Aleph, and the Chinuch HaMitzvah Lamed Gimel and Mitzvah Reish Yud Beis, they both, both consider Kibbut and Moira as two separate mitzvahs, which it is, of course, but both consider Moira as an assay. The Rambam and the Chinuch both say it's a mitzvah of Yiras of Aim. What makes it an assay if it seems to be what not to do? But I think the aside of today is that the mitzvah of Moira is an attitude. And if I had to choose one lashon, I would choose the Rambam and say, if I mitzvahs Reish Yud Aleph, shetivanu lirmi of Aim, and that is to treat them like someone you're scared of, k'may hamelech v'yelech imohem, and to live with them like a person that you're frightened from. And that's ish imay v'aviv tiro. To put it very simply, a child has to learn that his father is a king, and as the Charedim in Perek Tes Ois Chavav points out, and the mother's a queen. By the way, I should mention, today we're talking about Kibbut of, but there's no difference Kibbut of or Kibbut Aim. It's the same mitzvah. There's no different boys, sons, or daughters. But the way the Charedim says, the mitzvah is Yidma Oisam Be'enav Kemelech Umalka. No, a king you're scared of. There's a Moira. And now you could appreciate a little more what the Gemara says in Kedushin Daf Lamed Amud Beis. Ish imay v'aviv tiro is in Parshas V'eschanan. I'm sorry, in Parshas Kedoshim. Es Hashem Elokecha tiro is in Parshas V'eschanan. And the Gemara makes a remarkable statement. There's a connection here. Hishva kosev Moira of Aim leMoira Hamakom. When you have Moira for a parent, it's like having Moira from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But in this Gemara, there's something even more extraordinary. Because as the Gemara in Pesachim of Chav Beis, Amud Beis points out, Es Hashem Elokecha Tira, what could the S mean? What is tafel b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu? S always means atafel. And as we know, the famous Gemara, Shimon Amsuni Darshan, every S, until he came, there's Hashem Elokecha Tira. What is tafel b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And here we see the answer. Hushva akosiv moira ava aim to moira makah. It's incredible. Regarding kibud, hukshu kvoid mechvoid hamakah. A person has to learn to see his parent, his father as a king and his mother as a queen. Or maybe more than that, as the shtik shchina. And always spoiled, the Gemara says in Kedusha Lamed Aleph and Beis, Rabbi Yosef, kavishama kalkara de'ime, when he would hear his mother's footstep, he would say, Eikum mikam shchina da'asya. I have to stand up because the shchina is coming. Now, I don't know if Rabbi Yosef's mother was like the Heintige women, that some of them are great, Laim Dei Torah. I think his mother was a Erlecha Yidna. But he saw in his mother a shtik shchina. Eikim mikam shchina. Not stam, I'm standing up for my old mother, I'm standing up for a shtik shchina. And I want to tell you, it's not stam gesagt. Because unfortunately we hear sometimes a shayla, a bach asks, his parents are a bit abusive, domineering, he can't deal with them, what should he do? I always say, Ayin Reish Mem Yeredeya Siv Gimel. And that says it all. Frag the Gemara, and the Gemara is in Pesach in Kedusha Lamed Aleph, and the Shulchan Aruch quotes it. To what extent is the chiyuv of moira of aim? Zokti Shulchan Aruch, and based on the Gemara, and this was learned from the story of Dama ben Esina. Ben Lovash Chamudais, he was wearing his royal garments. The Yoshe B'Rosh HaKol, his mom is sitting open on, he is very, very prominent. Uba'av v'imai v'karu b'gadav v'koa roisha. They tore his garments, hit him over the head. V'yarku b'fneihem, for good measure, they spit at him. A new expression of kirachim avel bonim. His parents, mamish mavazim b'rabim. They destroyed his clothing. Lo yachlem oisai. That's the Gemara's story about Dama ben Esina. Imagine, a guy without a Torah, without a Seres HaDibros, understood on his own that if he's subjected to the worst humiliation, you keep quiet. But the Mechaber does a great service, and he adds a few words of the Rambam. So how do you do it? Yishtaik v'yiyarei mi melech malchi ha-melachem shetzivehu b'kach. That's the secret. If you see it as an abusive parent, you don't know what to do. If you see it as a shtik shchina, you keep your mouth closed. How do I do it? I don't know, but I'm going to do it. A guy at this fashtanin, kolshken a yid that has hushvu kvoidam and hushvu moiram to moira of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So basically, to review what we learned, kibbut of is in actions, moira is in inactions. Taka loy loy loy, but it's an asay. You know what the asay is? To see the moira, to see the shtik shchina. It's an attitude of seeing the father as a king and the mother as a queen. Now that we have the basic foundation, let us apply this to Maisa. So first of all, the first halacha that's taka the Gemara, lo yomed b'mekayimai. What does that mean? You shouldn't stand in his place. So Rashi learns, makam amyuchid la'aviv la'amayt sham b'sayid zikeinim im chaveirav ba'etza. In other words, the father is a prominent person, and when they have meetings, in those days they stood by the meetings, so the father has his corner, his place of prominence. The son is not allowed to sit in that place. Why not? Zok the Beis Yosef, it's zilusa shenira shemachshiv atzmai michlal anshe ha'etza v'nimtza shu mashva atzmai la'aviv. You know what the problem is? Hey, you're not your father. You're the son. He's the melech. Why are you standing in the melech's place? And again, in American society, it is hard to accept. What am I doing wrong? I'm standing in his place. He's not even here. Yeah, but if a father's a king, you don't stand in his place. Now, this pshat, of course, is limited. Only when a father has a place. We have Moshe when he has a meeting. But the Torah, according to Ramah, has another pshat. In other words, he has a special place where he stands at home. And the Beis Yosef quotes Rabbeinu Yeruchim, which is much more negeya. He has the makam kavua in shul. His place is not your place. So you can't, if he has a place at home to stand, which is not so common, Much more common, he has a place in Beis Medrash. He sits in the corner. Everyone like me, boy. He sits in the front. He's a Rav. Don't stand in his place. But even he stands in the back, by the pillar, in the corner. He has his place. Everybody knows, oh, that's Yossel's corner. Don't go there. How do we paskin? We have two different pshatim. So the Shulchan Aruch in Reish Mem, our Sim, and C Beis quotes like both pshatim because it's not a stira. Don't stand in a special place where he has meetings. And even in a place at home or in shul, don't stand in his place. Why? Again, because that's your father's place. That's enough. You don't need any more hezbollah. Even if it's not a chashuva father and not a chashuva place, but that's your father's place. Now, what's interesting is the Taz and Sif Cotton Bays says even if no one's there at the time, the father's not there, or bigger chiddush, there's no meeting going on. It's just an empty place. But that's Makom Aviv. Although some are Mekel, and they say if there's no meeting going on, it's not his place. But Zokti Ben Ishchai in his Sefer, in Shoiftim, Shana Beis, Ois Beis, even if it's Machlaikis, if Bifanav, or Shlai Bifanav is Asa, we treat it as a Sveika Deraisa L'chumra. And don't forget, a Shaila and Kibbutz invariably is a Suffolk Deraisa L'chumra. Now, we had once a Shaila, a father was a Maggid Shir, and typically he stood by the place where the Maggid Shir stands. And we had to go away for a few days, and he asked his son to take over. And the son was an Erlich Talmud Chacham. Could he stand in his father's place? This is his father's place in the Beis Medrash when he gives a shir. So the truth is that that's Oimid b'Mekoymai very, very obviously. And I must add, the Bach says, Oimid b'Mekoymai in a Beis HaKnesses is worse, because it's Barabim. He's filling his father's place. That's maybe improper. So the emphasis of the son, if you would ask me, I would say move the shtender to the side. Besides giving a shir about the Hilchas Shabbos that he's doing, he's also giving a shir, an unforgettable shir about Hilchas Kibbutz. He's showing people that he doesn't stay in his father's place. Now, how much do you have to move over? I don't know. In Hilchas Avelis, you have to move out of the Dalar Amis. But could be here, it's not totally in Dalar Amis. It's just showing that a reference to the place. I'm moving over. So I don't think it's totally in Dalar Amis, but definitely the best thing would be to move to the side. Now, if he really wants to stand in that place, whatever the reason is, no other place, maybe you can't move. So if you ask the father, Rishus, a father that's mutter, we'll soon see, of Shemachol al Moiroi is Machol. Now, I saw an interesting heta, it's an interesting way of looking at it. It's not the father's place, it's the Maggid Shir's place. Happens to be for the past 35 years, the father's the Maggid Shir. But it's not the father. So if he's the Maggid Shir, he sits there. No, maybe if you like that svar, fine. But interesting, I saw there, Tzroldige Pais can discuss if, where they duchen every day, so, and the father has a place that he stands for duchening. Can the son stand in that place? So to us, it's, come on, like, relax, don't get too nervous. But for the Paiskim, it's a Suffolk Deraisa. So the emphasis, like the Bach's understanding, that in shul, it's worse of a bezayin because it's known. If indeed the father is a kohen everyday duchens in that particular corner, why is the son mutter to stand there? Okay, now lamaisa, you could say maybe there's no chalois mokum kavua. I mean, a Beis Medrash, you have your place, you even bought your seat. Is duchening a place that it's his? No one can ever go there. It depends how you feel about it, but definitely the son should avoid standing in his father's place. If the father wants him to be there when he's not there, no. So again, as we said, that's certainly mutter.
How does the Rav know that the father's moichel?
Right?
How does the Rav know?
No, so the Rav should, the son should ask, and we'll soon see. You could assume stam b'chila, but it's something that we have to take it seriously. We ask Shailas about minhagim and Kolskin about this. Now the next halacha is probably more negeya, and that is la yoshib b'mekayim. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes this. Don't sit in the place that's meyucha for the father where he sits at home. Now again, this is interesting because although it's home and it's not berabim, it's still a problem. Kolskin, sitting in the father's seat in Beis Medrash, his makom kavos avada asa, and that's pasha. Now why? I'll tell you why. That's your father's place. Would you sit in Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky's seat when he was there or not there? But it's his place. And the Shulchan Aruch says bebeisai, but obviously in the shul is even more pasha. Maybe the chabachab beisai, even beisai and kolshkein in shul. The Taz spells out even if the father doesn't want to sit there, or he's not even there b'shas ma'isa, this is his place. Now, I once had an interesting shayla. I had stark enough from the year Shemayim of the shayl. It was a family simcha. It was a small sheva brachas at home, and they asked the son to speak, and the father moved to the side from the head table, and he was standing in his father's place where the father sits. In other words, it's not in his father's place in the Beis Medrash. He's standing to speak in his father's place where he sits. So that happens to be a shach, and the shach is if cut in aleph mutta lamid b'makom she'avid v'ragil leishev. So to stand in the place where the father stands is a problem. To sit where the father sits is a problem. But to stand and speak where the father sits, no, that's okay. But it's inspiring. Every detail is accounted for because sveika deraisa. Next question, and that's pashut. Baruch HaShulchan points out in Sif Tes that this is lav dafka the father. If the mother has a makom kavua, the daughter cannot sit in the makom kavua. And Beis HaKnesses says, but he says typically women don't have makom kavuas, and maybe even at home, maybe they don't have a makom kavua because they're busy in the kitchen. But that's one place I think the mothers would like the children to take over their place. You go in the kitchen, do the work, and let me sit down. But that's taka kibbutz. But no doubt about it, if the mother has a place by the table or in shul, then avada for the daughter to sit in that place is the same issur. A bacher asked me just the other day, does the issur apply to a father's seat in the kitchen, dinette? So I asked him innocently, well, how many seats? Maybe it's only 1 or 2 seats. So it's the families. He goes, no, there's 8 chairs in the dinette. I said, why do you want to sit in your father's seat? I thought maybe only in the dining room. This is why you need a chinuch. People don't think, they don't realize this is a deraisa. It's not a totally in manners or in midas. This is a deraisa. What we hear all the time in yeshiva also, let's say the Rebbe, the Rav, the parent has a special armchair. So to sit in his place is a problem, even in a regular chair. But I don't need the place. I need the chair. There's a special issur, especially in yeshiva, to sit in the Rosh Yeshiva's chair, but you're from Eichit. So you move the chair to the side. So there's an issur of sitting in his place. Is an issur sitting in his special chair? That's miyuchid loy. So in Svaru we might say that that's the throne. Why are you sitting in the king's throne? And the emes is it's not so far from the truth. The Yad Eliyahu Regula, they say when he was born when the Goyin was nifta, he was like a man of the Goyin. That's how big he was. In the Psakim, the end of Siman Mem, he has a shayla. The father has a special malbush chashuv. Can the son wear that malbush? And he says a davar nifla. He says, Maduch, the son can't stand in the father's place. Kolshkein, the father's malbush, because the malbush is considered kvoidai. The Gemara says he called his beged kvoidi. A beged is always referred to as the cover of the person. So he owes taking the father's malbush is us. No. So how about the seat? And Taka Ravozna in the Chuvas Chelik Ches Kufs Ches regarding a Rebbe's chair, he says if it's nicker, by the way it's built, that it's a special fancy chair, the Talmud cannot sit in it even Shaloi b'Makom Rabbi. So there are 2 dinim. There's the place and there's also the chair, which is if it's miyuchid. What I found the chiddush, but that's what the Paiskim say, can a child either sleep or sit in the parent's bed? Now, of course, the parent's bedroom should be off limits, but let's say, whatever the reason is, sleeping or sitting in the parent's bedroom. So the Mamloy is in Parshas Vayishlach, and again later in Parshas Yisro, says that there's an issur on the parent's bed. In fact, he says that was the chet of Ruvain, that he slept on his father's bed. But what should I tell you? Beside the mice is understandable, and that's the king's bed. But the Heintige Paiskim, that we was to have Rabbi Yashiv and Ben Sion Abba Shol quoted in a classic Sefer Meir Hayim V'Kibudim Amud Chavtes. He says a bed is not a place of kavod, and the Emes says the raya. He doesn't bring this raya, but maybe the raya is that the Gemara doesn't speak about bed. It says Soisa Oimid B'Mekayim Yoshev B'Makayim. It doesn't say about beds. So although the Mamloy is clearly asks it, but with this we find what to be makel, that's not a mokum of kavod. He also says, Agav, in that same sefer, that let's say you take the father's chair and you want to climb up to get something from the high cabinet, and the father's chair is the closest, so you slept the father's chair to climb up and to get something. So although you don't climb on a throne, but they say it's not a yeshiva or a midah of kavod that's standing on the chair. But I always say, don't forget to wipe the chair afterwards. Otherwise, you become an arba avos nasikin. You leave a dirty chair, the father sits down, that's a mazik, and that's zicha, no good. Another point I wanted to mention, I think there's a little confusion, and that is, let's say the parents come for Shabbos to the children. Now, Agav, I should always say this. A child invites the parents for Shabbos, he's mekayim the mitzvah deraisa of kibud, machilei mashkeu. Parents, you have both parents, a double mitzvah. The question is, who sits by the mi barosh? Who sits at the head table? So to me, what's the shaila? The father sits at the head table. What's the shaila? His father in your house, it was like an embassy. But everybody quotes the Aruch HaShulchan that you don't have to. I even heard that you're not supposed to. Now, what is this mysterious Aruch HaShulchan? He says, there are times when the father is old. Now, it seems like the father is old, and there's no mother even. And the father moves into the son's house, and the minute he writes, people have the son sitting at the head table, and the father on the side. How could that be? He says, because it's partially, it's logistics. Because typically, the Rosh Habayis, let's say in this case, the son sits in the head, and his wife sits next to him. If the father sits at the head table, so it's not sneezing, the father's at the head table, and his daughter-in-law is sitting on the side. That's not good. So let everybody keep their regular seats, the father will sit in a different seat. So I've even heard that Shulchan knows that the father, maybe you're the balabais, you sit there. It makes no sense. A father's a father. You're lucky you have a father, let him sit in the front. The Shulchan be malamet schus in a case that the father moved in, and maybe there's no mother, and only because it's a sneeze issue. So I have a better idea. Let the father sit at the head table, let the mother sit on the side, very nice sneeze, and the son and his wife will sit together wherever they want to sit. But it's hard to understand even as a havamina, but that should be done. And I always say, kibbutz needs a chinuch, and the best chinuch, as we always say, is not just do as I say, do as I do. A child that sees when his parents come for Shabbos, the world stops and his parents are busy with the grandparents, has the best chinuch in kibbutz of aim, and that's a lasting chinuch. And if he sees that his father's sitting at the head table and the zayd on the side, he's growing up with a big question mark on the whole kibbutz. So it's a proven fact that the kibbutz that we show to our parents goes over to the children. There's a wonderful opportunity to be batal mavutal the way it's supposed to be. There's a halach in Shulchan Aruch based on the Gemara. There's an Archaim Siman Tzadik Sif Chav Dalet regarding davening that a Talmud should not sit next to his Rebbe, which is understandable. You don't sit next to God Lador, you don't sit next to your parents. But the problem is the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Chayadam, Mishnah Berurah Sifkan Ayin Gimel, that since the reason is Yuara, Gaiva, so Zok the Mishnah Berurah, Hu Adin Aviv. Don't sit next to your father in shul. Now, this is a problem, because typically we all have father coming and children flanked on both sides of him. So, Lamaisa, the problem is that it's understandable. Is it right that a father sits next to a son, or a son next to their father? Are you on the same page? But we do this al chinuch. We want to watch our children. And basically, that's not just mechila. That's ritzoyni shel adam zui kvaydei. The father wants to come to shul with his children on both sides of him. So it's not just mechila. That's kibbutz. Your father wants you to sit there. Sit there. Don't sit in the back, because you know what happens when you sit in the back. He ends up not davening. No. But another heter, and you say it to heter, the Ramah there says that when does this issur apply? When the seats are given out based on chashivas. In a shul, it used to be, not simple, buy a seat. You got a seat. Chashivas, So it's like a big event, like a Siyam Hashas. So you don't just sit down next to, the God Lador or the Rav. You go to your seat. So then it was inappropriate son next to the father. But the Ramah in his times already says, but today that seats are sold, you buy a line of seats, it's yours. It's not chashivas. So there's no problem sitting next to the Rav if that's where the seat that you bought. So this is rather in some yeshivas, the mashkiach, the manal sits in the back, on the side, whatever. And the boy says, can I sit next to the Rav, next to the Rebbe, next to the manal? Teretz says, if that's the way his seating is, so, leave it. But that's definitely true regarding a child sitting next to the parents. Again, Mishnah Berurah says it should not be done, but the minig is today, not only we do it, but it should be done so the children should get the necessary chinuch during davening. You see this, a Rebbe sits by a tish, the son sits next to him. Obviously, that's the kibbutz that he wants to have. But what's interesting, and it's worth mentioning, the Beis Yosef, Kayidua, after he wrote the Beis Yosef, he added some notes. It's called Bedek Abayis, printed and together in the Beis Yosef. And in Bedek Abayis, in our Simon, he quotes Orchas Chaim, one of the Rishonim, Asa Leisha B'tzidai, B'loyam Tzoyim. It's never mutter to sit next to your father, even not in davening. His raya is from Shmuel Aleph Perek Chav, Pasuk Chav Hey, a famous story when Shaul was sitting in the front, and who was next to him? David, and then was Yonasan. So Rashi says, because the son doesn't next to the father. There was always someone in between. So the Orchas Chaim holds, sitting next to your father any place is disrespectful. You're not on his page. The Orchas Shulchan, and here he's right, says we never saw this, and it's not done. Maybe it's only a king is different, but we do see a father comes, sits next to the son, sits next to the father. And again, as we said, because that's the way the father wants. He wants his next to his son. Now, I use this because we Zoich to make chasen is, and at first chasen he made, it bothered me a little bit, by the head table, by the Suda. So the chasen sits in the middle, and they say, "Oh, you Ben, sit next to chasen, sit next to the chasen." I had that father, I had a shver, and so I wanted my father, my shver, to sit there, and then Baruch Hashem, they listened to me. No, but it's not done in many places. So then when my last son got married, so he married the Anikel of Hillel David. So I tried the same thing. I said, Zayda, sit next to the chassan. He goes, no. The seat next to the chassan is for the chassan's father. And I'm the grandfather, I'm next to that. You sit in your seat, and I sit in my seat. So I guess he understood it's like, it's not disrespectful. It's like, do you tell the Zayda to march the son down to the chuppah? It's the father's job. So I think either way is good. I would try to work it my way, but here I couldn't fight with him. So I definitely, deferred. But if the Zayda is willing to sit next to the chassan, that's a beautiful covet, and the father will sit next to him. Nothing's going to happen. The son doesn't have to be watched. So if you could, the more covet you give, and don't forget, unfortunately, keep it up is not forever. Chaparain, whenever you can. This is basically the concept of cheshivas of sitting, and again, chaparain, as long as you can. This is the way to do it. Now, we had an interesting shaila, which is rather two nafkaminas. Let's say there's only one seat, and the father's not there. Could the son sit in the seat? You're wondering, what, one seat? What is this, a family only have one chair? I'll give you two examples. Let's say a father and son work in a store, and there's one seat behind the counter. And typically the father sits there, and the son is around, comes in, whatever. But now the father's not there. Could the son sit in the father's chair? Or more common, someone asked me this, I'm not joking, his father's car that his father always drives, and he wants to drive once in a while. The driving seat is his father's seat. That doesn't sound right. It sounds a little modern. But the terrace is pashim. If there's only one seat, then it's talking not the father's seat. It's the storekeeper's seat, or it's the driver's seat. It's hard to say the father's car, so it's the father's seat. It's the driver. Now, typically the father is typically the driver. But it's hard to asa that you can't go in your father's car. Terry says we're going to look at that as the driver's seat or the storekeeper's seat. If father's not there, of course, you don't make the father stand, chas v'shalom. But if father's not there anyhow, you could take his place. A good question that needs a good answer, there's a beis hayra, and the father's one of the rabbanim. And he has to be out of town for a few days. He wants his son to fill his place. So this is a real makam kavua and a makam of chshivas. It's almost like the makam moishev. But the maisa, taka, if it's shach, the son find a different seat, avada, that's better. But if the father wants him to sit there, or he knows the father wants him to sit there, maybe fakert, the father wants to tell the son that he's a worthy malam makam, then adarabah, the father wants, with Sonia Shaladam, Zui Kvaide. I always wondered about this, and that is, let's say after the father passes away, especially if a Rav passes away, can and should the son immediately fill that place and sit in the father's place? So the emphasis, it's not so pashut as it seems, because we have an halacha in Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, Kedushin Lamed Aleph, I quote the lashon, Mechabdai b'chayav, Mechabdai b'moisai. That kibbut of is an eternal mitzvah that lasts forever. The mitzvah of kibbut of is not just when parents are alive. There's a mitzvah mechabdei b'moisai. The Gemara explains, and today we have many ways of doing that, saying kaddish, yartzeit, schusim, shiking peklach. But no doubt about it, as the Yereim, the Chinuch, the Divrei Malkiel and Beis, Kuf Lamed Gimel quotes this, Kuf Lamed Zayin quotes la halacha, that if the way the Gemara words it, mechabdei b'chaya, mechabdei b'moisai, that there's no difference in the chiyuv kibbutz for a living or a deceased parent. Both are the rice of kibbutz. And there are the Yerucham Fishel Perla, Kedargo, and Mitzvah Tess has a whole list of appointments that say that kibbutz is an eternal mitzvah. And that's why the Mechaber says in Siv Beis, Lo yikre'enu b'shmoi, don't call the father by his name, Lo b'chayev v'lo b'moisai. You can't say, my father David had a minig. That's wrong. It could be Nisa Deraisa. Now, whenever I say to some people, well, wait a minute, but I named my child after my father, so I can't call my child David? Parents, no. Your child you're allowed to call David. But don't say, my father David did this and that. That's wrong. It's still your father. So here's the question. Since the Mechaber says, you should not call your father's name when he's alive and afterwards, maybe who I didn't sit in his place is before and afterwards. Now, however, Ibayis aim akra, Ibayis aim svara. First of all, Ibayis aim svara, that if the father's no longer alive, so he doesn't have a seat. It's not a seat. So it's not his seat. What's wrong? His name is still his name. You're still called up Ben David. You still, you still make a kaddish for the neshama of so and so. But what's even more striking, this lashon I told you, like Rena b'shmoi, like b'chayv v'moisei, is in Siv Beis. The beginning of Siv Beis talks about not to sit in his place. It doesn't say anything about b'chayv v'moisei. Only regarding names that say this lashon. And I think the svar is like I told you, because a place is no longer his place. It's even less than shalai b'fanav. It's shalai b'chayav. But a name is a name. And I was very happy when I learned the sugya this time. I found in Derech Sicha Chelik Aleph Amid Reish Pei Beis a Ma'aser of Chaim. And those days, just Stipa just passed away during Shiva. So Chaim was basically still hiding in his little vinkula. But during the Shiva, he sat in his father's place. It doesn't say where, but it's Makam Aviv. And someone whispered to someone else, Mechabde b'moisi, what's Chaim doing? So he heard it, and he already shot his answer, the pasuk Vayeshev Shloim al Kisei David. So Chaim explains, not only allowed to, but it's a kibbut of the father sees that from his makom that there's a successor. So they asked, is that true even in basic Knesses? Rav Rashiva, he goes, absolutely. It's zeh kvoid of, if not a heta, a chiyuv. And taka poik chazi, a person passes away. So it's something that's very striking. Even during the Shiva, on Shabbos, when the son comes to shul, he sits in his father's place. He's replacing his father as the Rav, Rebbe, whatever it may be. Now, Be'emes, the Toysri Azokan writes Beferish and our Gemara that Dafka B'chayav is there an issur of Mekaymai. But Derech Klau, is there a Heta Mechila regarding Moira? L'masal Saisa Devarav, sitting in his place. So you're wondering, what's the shayla? Don't we know the Gemara in Kedusha Lamed Beis, Shulchan Aruch Sif Yotes, that of Shemachal HaKvoide Kvoide Machal. But look again, you'll see it's not so pashut. Because there's no doubt about it. Why is Kvoide Machal? So on a simple level, it's the father's prerogative. It's my covet. I'm giving it up. So it's mine. I'm giving it up. Could be a little more lumdish maybe, that if a father's moichel, kilus kabalti. So you want to give me a cup of tea? Don't bother. I enjoy better watching you. So as if he got the kibbut. But let's say when these svaras don't apply, and I'll give you an example. Let's say a person's mevaze his father. I still remember when I was a child. It was traumatic to me at the time. Someone in our neighborhood, I lived in a very Hamish neighborhood. The little kid, 5-year-old, called his father Ari. That was his father's name. I said, what is this? In our family, we like to be close, so we called the father by his first name. That's Shigoyin. Right? That's an issur of bizayin. And the Rivash in Simon Reish Chaf says, even though of Shemachal HaKvoide is machal, but this doesn't help for bizayin. That's pashut. And both svaras don't apply. You can't say Ilus Kabalti and it's my prerogative. So we see two extremes. Kvoide machal, bizayin is not machal. Now ask an intelligent question. How do you fit in Moira? Is Moira like kibbud, or is Moira like bizayin? That's a good question, because it's sicher not regular kibbud. You can't say kilus kabalti by Moira. And Taka, some hold that Moira does not help bechila. But Lamaisa, the Chinuch and Reish Yud Beis, the Birkei Yosef, Sivkot Yud Gimel, both say, and others say it also, that moira is not as severe as bezoyin, and taka for moira, sitting in his place, standing in his place, and we'll soon see Saisa Devarav, the minig is to be makel, and mechila does help. And it's a taka I want to mention that mechila helps, but the chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs, the son that has seichel, should know that even if the father is moichel, but if you do it, there's a mitzvah. You know, we might think if the father is moichel, so he's an ein mitzvah v'oisa. The Radvaz and Chelik Aleph Tov Kuv Chav Daled and Bemis, the Yisod state in Rishonim, it's not for now, but the fact that mechila helps, Dr. Radvaz, only is that the son's not punished if he doesn't do it. But it is a ma'isa mitzvah. It's a mitzvah chiyuvis, and the son does, he's mekayim a mitzvah. It's a tricky thing. You know, we think if he's meichel, so there's no mitzvah, so why bother doing it? No. It's the same mitzvah, but the father's meichel. And why do I stress this? Because to me, it's a pasha mitzvah lefarsim. There's a precious part of kibbutz, and that's the mitzvah of standing up for parents. The Gemara, Makar and the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef stood up for his mother. Shulchan Aruch Siv Zayin says it. It's a mitzvah deraisa l'chol hadayis. Why is this mitzvah neglected in our times? My parents are moichel. Okay, but you're a smart person. You know, chapa mitzvah. Yeah, people are afraid if I stand up for my parents, they're going to get suspicious. You know, what do you need? You need some money? What do you need? I'll give you money. You don't have to stand up. You know, so I tell them, stand up a few times and they'll see you're legitimate and they won't worry, you know. Blame it on me, I tell the Bachur. But it's something that really, it's something that's really the American, you know, mentality got into our minds, and it's wrong. You know, I once asked for a palm when my children were getting older, they stood up for me, I was very uncomfortable about it. He goes, why are you uncomfortable? The Torah says to do it, it's a mitzvah. Why are you uncomfortable? You know, well, what are we smarter than the Torah? You know, it's something that the Torah's hashkafa is our way of life. So it's not, the parents shouldn't feel uncomfortable, and the son should be smart enough to chap the mitzvah. They're moichel. Okay, they're moichel. So hopefully they're moichel. There's no einish if you don't stand up. But chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs, as long as you're zeicha to have a parent, stand up for them. Ashrecha b'olam hazeh v'toivle b'olam haba. An important attitude, I also, you know, where you see this, is Rav Moshe. Again, it almost caught me by surprise, but in Yeridei Chelik Gimel Siman Tzadik Vav, Reb Reuven, his son, Zayin Gesund and Stark, became 20 years old, and he asked his father, what should I do? I'm becoming 20, you know, he wanted his father to give him some inside information about what's most important in life. So Moshe writes, one of the main things he writes is be nizer and kibbut aim. You notice he didn't say kibbut of aim, not about himself. He says, because it's very hard for people to do it right, because you're used to it when you're young, to ignore parents. So be very careful. Ki afim hi moicheles chas v'sholem lismoich al zeh. I don't know what that means, chas v'sholem. I guess Moshe wanted to make a point. You have a mother? Take advantage. Chaperain. She's moichel, but chas v'sholem lismoich al zeh. Again, each kibbud, each moira is a mitzvah deraisa. Chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs. So basically, this hayesod is that the Torah knows better. And I saw this in a Chazon Ish as well. The Chazon Ish in Yeridei Kuf Mem Tesiv Kot and Aleph, going on a Gemara which is not for now, but he says that maybe you'll end for Pshat in the Gemara that the father was moichel, or the Rebbe was moichel. Loi mistavet to say that, she'ein royu lasis kain. He's talking to the parents and the Rebbeim. It's not a good idea to be moichel children on a regular basis. Now later in Kuf and Aleph Beis, he explains what he means. We find that it's not kedai to be moichel on a regular basis. Now, occasionally, yeah, but not a regular basis. Why? I think the Psar is Pashut. The Torah says, Kabiris Havicha, and you say, you know, La Shiras Daiti, I think things should be different. You know, why do you think he's smarter than the Torah? Torah says, Kabed. No. Occasionally, if you have a difficult child, but basically, we follow the Torah, and that's our Samachayim. And I'll give you another mashal. In Archaim Tov Ayim Bei Sif Hey, the Mechabes is a Chiddush. Maybe it's not a Chiddush, but it's a Chiddush. L'gadi Pesach by night, Ben Eitzel Aviv Tzorach HaSeiba. What's the Chiddush? Why do you have to make a Seiba? It's part of the Seiba. Zok the Mishnah, even though it's disrespectful to make a Seiba by the father, but the father is Moichel. And that's based on a She'iltis, that the father is Moichel. So, the Shach says, Mistama, Ha'av moichel al kvaydai, regarding other things, stamad is a mechila, like we find in Hilchas Pesach. So the Shach extends Hilchas Pesach to all in Yom Kippur. Tainat Arachayim HaKadosh in a Sefer Rishon LeTzion, it's not true. The Shach was talking by a mitzvah, the Shulchan Aruch was talking by a mitzvah of Haseba. Then Stama Moichel. Who gives the Shach the right to extend that to any situation? Maybe only by a mitzvah, then you're Moichel. So already the Arachayim HaKadosh was sensitive, don't live a life of Mechila. Chaperayim. If you have a mitzvah, so the mitzvah of Haseba overrides the mitzvah of Kibbutz. That's basically part one. Part two, in a certain sense, a little more challenging, and that's loisaisa devarav v'loi machriyai. A simple example: the father makes a statement, and the son, who thinks like American boys, not only I am smarter than my father, but I'm even older, as some say, so he knows better. No, I think it's different. Why are you arguing with the king? Why are you arguing with the Rebbeinu Shalom? Why are you the Shechina? So definitely, we don't argue with parents. The same is with a mother. That's posh. The Shulchan Aruch in Reish Mem Aleph Vav, Pachad de Gezach, but he says regarding the issur of or makla of imay, that if someone's mavaza the parents, even bremiza, a facial gesture is also an issur. Father says something and the son makes one of his kiba apam horgu ish reactions. That's a Mechaber calls it or makla of imay. So that's soisa. The big question is, what does that include? What is included in the issur of soisa? Is it mili de alma? Is it divrei Torah? Is it both? Is it one of them? So this is tricky because we're talking about a son that learns with his father. He can't argue with his father. Mili de alma, is that important enough? It should be asa. So in the Gemara, there's no mention of what loy soisa. Maybe it includes both. Rashi, loy machriya, he spells out when he's learning with the father in Torah. But the Chiddush is the Rogachev and his Safas Mareach on the Rambam. He learns that the only issur is by Torah and not Mil de Alma. Where the Rogachev see this? From Parashat Vayechi. We know when Yaakov is about to give the brachas to Menashe and Ephraim, so Yosef says, like Cain Avi. Whoa, Masayis Dvarav. Zok the Rogachev, that's only by Mili de Shmaya by Torah. Mil de Alma is a Sayis Dvarav. But the Emma says he's Kamat Adas Yochid. Because first of all, as we in Seichel, why is Mili de Alma anything different? Your father says something, you're a big maven. If anything, I would say, Limit Torah, you can't just agree if it's wrong, you have to speak up. Mili de Alma was Geit Techon. What do you have to argue? Just let it go by. It's Geit Techon, leave it go. But Lamaisa, most Paiskim hold that it goes on both. Mili the Alma and Torah. The Makla in Kedusha Lamed Aleph, the Chayodim, Samach Zayin Ches, Aruch HaShulchan, in Sif Yud Gimel. What was Yosef's justification? So it's Pashit. Reb Chaim Kanievsky in Derech Sicha Beis Samach Gimel says his father made a mistake. He didn't know. He wasn't supposed to know. He didn't know which was Bechor. Of course, it's more Pashit. His father was blind, couldn't see. In other words, a mistake that the father, you're saying you're making a mistake because you're not smart enough, that's disrespectful. If he doesn't know a Metzias, so you just tell him a Metzias. But the problem, the Pella, is that we find throughout Shas, I saw a lashon of the Be'er and Sanhedrin Daf Kuf, Shas is moli al kol gedoi seha, is overflowing with situations that a Talmud argues with the Rebbe and a father argues with the son. A son argues with the father. Rebbe Am Shimon Gamliel, he argued on his father, and his Rebbe the same. The Torah, we know the Torah argues on his Rosh sometimes, on his father, the Rosh sometimes. And if you look, there's a whole list of places in Shas that that Talmud argues on his Rebbe. Kibbutz, what's the head to argue on a Rebbe or a father? And Fakir, the Rebbe is more of a chaymer. So Zok the Be'er Sheva, it's clear from the Gemara that in Torah there's no issur arguing on your father or Rebbe. But one of his rayas is astonishing. In Kedushin Lamed Amud Beis, the sugya of Kibbutz, what's shot in the pasuk as oyavim bishar? Zok the Gemara, Avu B'noi, Rava Talmidai, that when they learn, they are like enemies, they're out to get each other. But Lipsoif, that's Oyavim Bishar, Lipsoif, Nasa Oyhavim Zer Lozer, and then Oyhavim Bishar in the Shar Hamatsuyanim Balacha. So the Gemara gives 2 examples that when they're learning, they're out, they're fighting. But they end up okay. So, Frekti Beersheva, how could you say you can argue on your Rebbe or your father? So he writes, Lule Piv HaKadosh Al Rashi, V'chol HaNegroim Acharav HaTor V'Aro Beis Yosef. In other words, if I'm not arguing against the whole world, which I am, I would like to say the following. In other words, he knows that he's a lone voice. But Zakti Beersheva, in learning, you have to speak up. Torah is not hefka. And as he puts it, Ki Torah, quoting a lashon of a Rosh, Torah's emes hoisa, Torah's emes hu ve'ein machnifim l'shum adam. You can't overlook an injustice in Torah. So now we have a problem. The Poskim say you can't argue in Dvar Halacha. And the Rashas, Molei Gedai say you're allowed to. And we don't pass like the Beersheva. So how do we explain this? So on a simple level, arguing on a psak halacha is taka wrong. But being mefalpel, shlak levitaria, the father wants that. He doesn't have an opinion, not being sayis advarv yet. Let's learn the sugya together. And that would explain the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Yud. That learning together. If there was I hold its asa, and I hold its mutter, be careful. But figuring out a sugya, pilpul, shakivataria, and taka the Atzmas Yosef in our Gemara, and the Pesachei Tshuva in our Chashulchan quotes halacha, the issur is arguing on a final psak halacha, but not on learning together and arguing together. You're learning a daf yomi, father and son. It's beautiful to watch. You can't argue. You're not going to get anywhere. The second chiluk is that if the son brings a raya, so he's not arguing on the father, as the priest in Sifkot and Gimel says, it's not the son that's arguing, it's the raya that's arguing. The father is looking for the hammer and goes, it's a Pharisee Gemara, connecting me, then I'm Batla Daiti. Okay, there's an earlier source that Trumas Hadeshin in Reish Lamed Ches, he says when the Talmud sees the Rebbe made a mistake, what should he do? He says, just bring a raya and show the Rebbe the raya. You're not arguing. And he has and Be'emes, this would explain why many times we see that the Torah argued on his father. There's another heta, and that's obvious if the father wants to hear the son's opinion. So Ritzonish Adam Zui Kvaydi, it's more than Mechila, it's Kibud. I want to learn with you, I want to hear, I want to come to the emes. Some say Shaloi Befonov is also mutter. Don't forget, we saw Paiskim hold Shaloi Befonov is mutter. And the Taz, who holds Shaloi Befonov by sitting his asa, he says by learning his mutter, and the raya is that the Torah argues on his father. Now, not all agree. The Shach holds Shaloi Befonov is asa, but we definitely see Shaloi Befonov, some hold it might be a tzad to be mekel. Now, Lamais in Shulchan Aruch, it's very tricky. Loisais, what the Shulchan Aruch holds is a mutter Shaloi Befonov. Listen to his lashon. Loisais devarav v'loi machriyas devarav befonov. So regarding Machriya, he says Befonov. Loisaisa, he just writes Stam. Is Befonov going on both, Saisa and Machriya, or only Machriya, but Saisa is Taka Asa? So it's not so pashit, Shaloi Befonov is Mutter, but the Paiskim are Mekel, Chayadim, or Chashuch, has an issue Mekel, that to argue on the father Shaloi Befonov, there is a Heta Shaloi Befonov. Now, what's probably more Mutter is to argue on the father, Acha Misas Aviv. Again, like we said, it's not just Shaloi Befonov, but he's not in this world. Now, even though it's his opinion, but it's definitely more mutter. And the Shach and Reish Membei, the end of Sifkot and Gimel, points out that by Rebbe also Shaloi Befonov is mutter. So we have a few ateirim why Talmidim arguing on Rebbeim, children on fathers, basically either pilpul or raya or Shaloi Befonov, Achamoisai. I did see the Steichemet Mereches Vav, the end of Klal Lamed Aleph says, but to write against your father, that's worse than Shaloi Befonov. I guess the pshat is because it's printed all over, and they see, you're arguing the father. But the other term do apply. If you have a raya, or the father wanted to hear your shita, then enechanami desat to be mekel. The best eitzah is to ask the father for permission. Can I say something differently? Once you have mechila, avada, there's a heta. We once had a shayla, a father was writing a sefer, and he asked his son to proofread it. Find mistakes, what are you doing to him? So I told him, it's interesting, a mistake for the father is mamish ritzoynai. When they printed the Vilna Shas, they paid people to find mistakes. Because, you correct something now better than later. So the father wants that, but I told him, use seichel. Don't say, I found 35 mistakes that you made. You could say, I think there's something wrong with this, the printing error, point it out in a respectable way. Not, you made so many mistakes. I'll give you a more tricky question. The father's about koira, and the son has a sharp ear, and he finds his mistakes. So the Rebbe Ephraim, Chelik Vav, Lamed Gimel, Sif Cotton Gimel says that Ritzoyne Shel Adam Zui Kvaida, he doesn't want to make mistakes, so you're allowed to call out. But like Rabbi Yashiv says, don't scream out, Try to whisper, that he should hear. Ma'aseh Shahid is a true story. A son stayed up a whole night, davening was seeking, and went to sleep. And the father came away after davening, and his father's ready, 9 o'clock, the boy's sleeping, and he gave him a whole drasha. And the son was listening quietly, in bed, with pajamas, but he didn't do anything wrong. He went to sleep 2 hours ago. Can he speak up and defend himself? Is that Saisa Devarav? So the emes is that sounds like Saisa Devarav. But you could do it in a way that's not Saisa Devarav. You could say, can I explain? Don't say, can I defend myself, because then you're making a war out of it. But can I explain? Hopefully the father will accept that. Reb Chaim Kanievsky agreed to a raya, so say for Yosha Hoiri Amid Reishud Gimel, that better listen and then you could speak up. Because when Bnei Gad Mei Reuven gave their idea what to do, Moshe gave them Musa, and then they said, no, what we meant, we're going to go fight, and then go back to over Eva Yarden. Why didn't they speak up right away? Because you know what, let them finish. And then you could say your own point. So Reb Chaim held that you're allowed to, not defend yourself, it's the wrong word, you're allowed to explain your actions. But let me tell you, I must tell you this, there's a very chashuv a sefer, Oyel Yaakov, on Kibbutz, and he says what he heard from Reb Chaim's Einikel, that they were witness to this story. The Stipler was once, he had a daughter, her husband passed away young, the Rebbe Brazam, and she lived together with the Stipler. And she once mentioned to the Stipler casually that Chaim has a very bad backache, and his mom is terrible. The Stipler says, really? And he ran to Chaim's house, and says, Chaim, how you feeling? He says, perfect. Chaim, how you feeling? He says, perfect. No, Chaim, lay down. And called Rebbe Kanievsky to cook up Shem and Zayis. Stipler had a remedy for a bad backache. He said, Chaim, lay down. I'm going to smear you with Shem and Zayis. Today you don't go to Koilel because it's not good for your back. It's going to get worse. So Chaim is like a soldier following his father's advice. Stipler feels good. He treated his son. He comes home and he told, and the Rebbe Brazam said, Tata, where'd you go? What do you mean? I ran to Reb Chaim. He had to take care of his backache. He goes, no, I meant my Edom Chaim Kluft. Not Chaim, my brother. I would call him Reb Chaim. So Stipler runs back to Reb Chaim's house, and where do you think Reb Chaim Kanievsky was? Laying on his back, miskailel, with this olive oil, roasting his back. He didn't say a word. Now, you hear that, and you know what it means, that, Kimelech and a Malka, like the Eikim Mikame Shchina. Why do I say this? Because we have another question, a tricky question, a very challenging question when a father and son work together. Typically they're in a business together. It's a wonderful thing that you can work together, but be careful, the son should be careful. Saisa Devarav takes on a new meaning. Now, of course, the parent wants to hear the son's opinion, but even so, say it with great derech eretz, don't forget the shchina in the parent. When the parent is doing something wrong, so we all know the Gemara in Kedushin Lamed Beis, you can't say, you're not allowed to do that. So you have to make a whole spiel. I learned in Mishnah Berurah that you're now allowed to take out the pits from the watermelon because it's bayra, or something like that. And that's Kepas Yerideh Reish Mem, see if you're Aleph. I saw another age you could say, I didn't know it's mutter to do that. Now here, this is a big pliya, which in the logistics it always bothered me. Lamaisa, the Gemara Paskins above Metzia Lamed Beis, if a father's doing an avla, the son's mechuyev to speak up. The chayach goes on the father. And if this, and where the Gemara's lashon is oiver, it's an ongoing avla. If you make a hint that's so perfect, the father doesn't chap, and the father does the avera, so the son did an avla. You can't let this crime go on. So teretz, you have to make a hint that the father will chap right away. So what are you gaining? You can't say, don't do that. Say, I learned in Mishnah Berurah that this is awesome. What are you gaining? Teretz is, you're gaining the realization that that's your king. And you can't tell a king what to do. So you have to make, I would call it like a shinoi, almost like a shinoi, make a game. I learned once that there's a problem. But don't directly say the father's wrong, It's just distancing yourself from a lack of kavod. So I'll give it a mush like a shinoi. You do the same thing, but a shin is okay. But at the end of the day, it has to be done effectively, but respectively, both are true. Now, of course, a father or mother, the same halacha. And people think with the mother, you tell her what to do because you learned in yeshiva, she didn't. Adarabah, she doesn't know better. Tell her with great respect, that's the halacha. The Chafetz Chaim in Klal Yud, Sif Yud, it says when a parent talks lashonhora, the child has to stop it. In fact, he quotes a frightening Tana de Be'elio. When a child sees a parent saying lashonhora, he doesn't say anything about it. Hu veheim einem emalim shnoisam rachmana litzlan. So it's a sensitive issue and approach with great caution. What I always found inspiring is lay machriya. What does it mean lay machriya? So on a simple level, Rashi teaches, if the father has a machlaikis with someone else, don't say nirin divri pliny, because you're siding with the other person, not your father. Very nice. Correct. All the Rishonim, but it's too pashut. So that's saisa. So why is machriya different? So most Rishonim explain that here this is a bigger chiddush. Lay machriya means don't agree with your father. Now let me be clear. Children say, "What's wrong? I finally agree. I'm allowed to agree. What should I do?" It doesn't mean that. It means the father says a statement, and you say, "Tati, I agree to you. Good gesagt." That's disrespectful. Because if Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky says a psak, you don't say, "Yeah, I agree." Who are you? A son has to see the father like a melech. Leisaisa means don't contradict. And a more edel halach is don't agree. A king doesn't need your agreement. And that's the simple pshat in Volei Machriya. In fact, I once had a shaila, I thought of the shaila, a father makes a speech. Can the son says, "I enjoyed the speech very much"? Is that the pshat in Machriya? The answer is the chiluk between agreeing and enjoying. The father very much wants to hear that his speech was well received. The point is, agreeing means that he needs your haskama, and you're on the level to give an haskama. That's anti-Torah. Now, avada and avada, if it gives a nachat that the child agrees, that's okay. But it has to be with a sensitivity to know your place. Let me leave you with one more beautiful, beautiful point, which has many nafkamina, but I'll be very brief because it's negeya for us. The mother tells the son, wear a sweater. A weather like today. And the son says, "Oh no, I'm not even wearing a coat today. Wearing a sweater?" Does the son have to wear the sweater because the mother had to wear a sweater? So the truth is, if you think about it, why is the son mechuyev to wear a sweater? Kibbutz is ma'achol mashke, machdis moitzi, and moira is lo yistadvar, lo yibkaimai. So if you take the sweater and put it on the mother, so that's malbishay. But if I wear a sweater, how's that kibbutz of or moira of? So, any request that is not directly none of the parents, do this, do that, eat broccoli, and go to the chassan, and do that, and sleep 12 hours a night, where all the parents request, you have to, there's no chiv to listen. Zok de makna davanifla, now a Gemara. Frek de makna, the Paiskim refer to kibbutz as a mitzvah asay. But soisa and oimid is loisa say. Zok de makna, the greatest loisoisa devar is the parents have to do something, do it. So it's included in the Gemara that listen to their request, otherwise that's soisa devar rayim. And then he has even better raya. Because the famous Gemara in Kedushin, ish imav turo, that a woman is part from kibbutz because she's busy with her husband. A married woman is busy with her husband. Frek de makna, the most obvious question. Where do you learn that a married woman is potter from kibbutz? Ish imav tiro, which is moira. Moira, why is she potter? She can't avoid sitting in his seat, standing in his place. So the makna the teretz is that if the father says to do something, go shopping and get something for yourself. I want you to enjoy it. Look over his chaydish. Daughter says, I can't do it. My husband needs me. Listening to requests is part of moira, because if you don't listen, that's showing a lack of respect. So the Makna holds any request, of course that's reasonable, is included in La Yista Devarav, and there's two rayas. But here's an important chap, and I'm telling you, the parent, not to the children, they shouldn't hear this. Rabbi Yashiv said a pasha to chilik. Sometimes the parents ask things the child can't do it, it's just unreasonable. So he made a chilik, b'fanav, don't ignore the parent, because that's taka disrespectful. Put on the sweater, walk out of the house, around the corner, take it off. Because if they don't know about it, it's not really stiras devarav. So we see how the importance of learning the sugya properly. The Moira has a shaykhis to all of requests. Halavai should be zaychet arichas yamim from keep it up. I couldn't talk to you all.
Shem Irgen Shir Telaktiv Bigashakarta of Smith for today's shir. The Shem after Kaddish. The Smith says seek him on the shir. Tomorrow there's a special asifa of Shidduchim Rav Chaim Shmuel from Yerushalayim 1 p.m. Vananya ben Akashem Ratzakarish Baruch Lazakes as the Shel V'Hivim Torah Mitzvah Shnema Alena Chofetz and Mansitka Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh.
Amen. 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 Yehei Shmei Rabba Mevarach Yolam Omeir Mayo. Amen. Ready? Just 2 minutes, because I don't want to keep him and the whole other waiting. Yeah, okay, sure.
The voice said to seek him of today's shir.
Okay, just what we learned today, Be'ez Hashem, like the Shalmi calls it, Kibarab's Chamura Sheba Chamurais, Hukshu Kvaidam, Hushu Kvaidam. The secret is to see the king and queen in parents, to see the Mekamei Shchin in parents, and they understand this big sugya, Moira, is basically an asay. The attitude is tira. It expresses itself primarily in not to do, but as we saw, doing also. La yista devarav means listening to their requests, but basically it's an asay of moira, and an attitude to see the shtik shchin in the parent. Ayimid ben Mekaimai is in a makam kavua, in a place of prominence, even shalai b'fanav, standing by in a place where the father gives a shir. If the father gives rishus, it's mutta, otherwise stand it to the side. A place of duchening is probably not so much of a makam kavua, but definitely in a place in shul, in yeshiva, a makam kavua should be only for the father, not for the child. A fancy chair is also included in the is, not just sitting in his place, but not sitting in his chair. You're allowed to stand on the chair or sleep in the bed, but basically standing in his place, sitting in his place is the real issur of ish imav tiro. The same applies to a mother. In all cases, when a parent comes for Shabbos, parent, father or mother, put them in a prominent place where they belong. It's a good chinuch for children. The minig is to daven next to parents, even though Mr. Burr says that wasn't done, but today it's done because that's the Ritzayne Shel Adam. By a chasana, the father is next to his child. If he wants to give it to his father, that's Tavel LaBracha. If there's only one seat, like in a store or a car, so then the son is now driving, of course, he can sit in that place. Achamisa, there is kibud regarding names, but there's no kibud regarding places, and as we said, even arguing, most places hold it's mutter to argue achamoisai. Mechila helps for kibud and moira, but not for bezoyin. Amida, standing for parents, is a precious mitzvah. It should be done as long as you're zaychet to have parents. Ashrecha b'olam hazeh. Even though mechila helps, but chapara in the mitzvah. Stam, we're not smarter than the Torah. We do what the Ratzon Torah is. Soisa devarav is merely the alma and in Torah, but there are a few heterim, either if it's pilpul or shakal v'tarya, to bring a raya, so the raya is arguing, if the father wants to hear your shita, shalai b'fanav achamisa, but basically, arguing on a psak halach has to be done with the right approach. If the father wants to hear your shita, then of course you're allowed to say it. Proofreading, so point out the mistakes, not the father's mistakes, correct the balkaira, do it with their cheretz. Ksiva is a problem, as the Steichemet says. It's wrong, of course, when you're getting wrong criticism, try to let the parent finish and then explain yourself, not defend yourself. Work with parents, be careful, it should not be a saisa devara, very often it is, but make sure that it's done in a pleasant way. Parents doing issur, you have to stop the issur immediately, but you have to use a shina, like we said, to say it indirectly. Machriya means don't agree. I mean, of course, agree, but don't say as if they need your agreement. Compliment the speech that the father made is a mitzvah, and basically following requests of the parents, if it's possible, do it. That's saisa devara. If it's mamish impossible, we have Rabbi Yasha's heta, befanav, just go along with it, and shalai befanav, you could do what